Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, as the sign says, thank you for coming today. And let's get the party started. Today's discussion, we're going to be talking about temperature and the effects of temperature on running ability or run walk or walk ability. And depending on hot or cold or whatever, we've discussed this general idea before in the past, the three H's from hell, which are heat, hills, and headwinds, all of which slow you down. I mean, there's just no way around it. Heat, hills, and headwinds are definitely going to slow you down. And we're really primarily going to talk about heat and cold, and how that slows you down. But same thing with hills. LA Marathon has some hills, especially the first 6 miles. Rose Bowl half, hills. We're going to talk about that next week. And headwinds, which we usually don't get in Rose Bowl or LA Marathon, but definitely hills we're going to be talking about next week and how to run the Rose Bowl half next week. That's what our focus is going to be on. Um, so we're going to talk, like I said, about heat and humidity, the effects of humidity, uh, um, and the effects of cold, and an idea of psychology, which I refer to as blasphemy. And then we'll have question and answer and all of that. So let's kick it off and let's move my face out of the way there a little. Um, Here's a little quote that I got from AI search of the internet. And basically it says that, a general rule for every 5-degree increase in temperature above 60 degrees, now we're talking about heat for a second, above 60 degrees, every 5 degrees, you're going to slow down 20 to 30 seconds per mile, right? So if you're going like 80 degrees, 20 to 30 seconds, that's 4 times 5 is 20 degrees more, right? So that's 4 times 20 to 30 seconds per mile slower. So meaning you're going to add about, what is that? 40 to, excuse me, that's about 80 to 120 seconds. So that's around a minute and a half to 2 minutes, 80 seconds, 10 seconds slower than or faster than a minute and a half, but roughly a minute and a half to 2 minutes slower for that additional 20 degrees up to 80 degrees. Now, I'm reminded that in 2004, when I was pace leading the LA Marathon, we thought it was going to go up in the upper 80s, which would have been 25 degrees or 5 times 20 to 30, right? So even above 2 minutes, almost 2.5 minutes slower. It actually went up to 93 degrees. And around my and I announced to my group, I said, there's no way we're going to do what we're supposed to do. Even the coach, Pat Connolly at the time, said, slow it down, everybody. And I said, we're going to be about 25 minutes slower. We ended up about 25 minutes slower because the heat went up even above what we anticipated. And at about mile 21, a little over 20, we passed all of group four. We were in group five. All of group four, we were doing exactly 10-minute per mile pace back then. Everything was by pace. We're not really at 10-minute. There's no group that's really 10-minute pace anymore. That's sort of similar to group five. At any rate, at a 10-minute per mile pace, we came in about 20 to 25 minutes slower. We passed group four, mile 21, mile 22. We passed group three, somewhere around 25. We passed group two. And toward the finish line, we even passed a few people from the fastest group back then, which was group one. And they were still struggling to finish. Most of them had finished. We passed almost everyone faster than us in the LA Roadrunners because we slowed down that 25 in the end, 25 minutes total. We were supposed to finish at a 4:10. We ended up finishing like 4:25. Um, no, excuse me. We ended up finishing at about 4:35, something like that. So it was, or 4:30, somewhere around. We were about 25 minutes slower. Anyway, food for thought, that is absolutely an important element. Certainly the Rose Bowl half, we are not going to be dealing with heat. It's probably going to be a perfectly cool day, around the 60s or so. So we really don't have to deal with that increase in temperature. But for future, maybe LA Marathon, for future reference, especially in the summer, that's an important one to consider. I remember years ago hearing this statistic. Some mathematician had calculated, or somebody had calculated that, first of all, no one is going to sweat out a gallon. You're not going to lose that much hydration quickly. But if you could sweat out a gallon, given sweat rate and the amount of sweat that your body is cooled because you're losing heat through that sweat, got the picture? If you could if you could lose a gallon of sweat, you would actually lose 600 degrees of body heat. Now, neither is possible. But if you add up the incremental amounts of sweat that you use, if you could lose a gallon of sweat and added all that up, total, you would lose 600 degrees of body temperature. So your body definitely heats up from all of this. And what happens to your body when it heats up? Well, your heart rate starts increasing more and more and more as your body temperature increases more and more and more, because your heart is essentially the fuel pump is essentially the water pump that, like your car, will send water from the motor, essentially. In this case, it's blood from the heart, but it'll send water from the motor or through around the motor through your radiator, right? And the radiator on your body is the epidermal layer of your skin, the outer layer of your skin, where you're sweating out heat, where the pores in your skin are losing temperature. That's pretty much where your radiator is, your human radiator. It's the same concept. Although the one amazing thing about us human beings is that our heart rate can increase the hotter we get to generate more water, hot water from internal organs to the skin layer, the radiator, if you want to call it that. We can pump more water, more blood in this case, quicker to get that heat out of our system even faster, where your car pretty much has one pump rate, right? The water pump in your car will only pump water at like one rate. It won't speed up, where your heart will actually speed up the warmer you get to cool your body off more quickly. So if your heart rate is going up and up and up, what happens to your glycogen levels? Well, your glycogen levels are going to start going down and down and down and down and down unless you slow up to match your aerobic level, your normal marathon race pace, or your normal marathon race pace heart rate, right? If your heart rate's too high, you're going to lose glycogen. If you lose too much glycogen, you're going to come closer and closer to hitting the wall. And eventually you will do that on a hot day if your heart rate is higher. In other words, you're going to need to slow it down. Exactly what you're looking at in front of you is telling you. But that's the physiological reason why, or certainly one reason. Um, you're going to need more sodium. You're going to need more hydration because you sweat, right? You sweat out sodium, you sweat out hydration. The lower your hydration, meaning the lower your blood levels, the harder, again, your heart rate is going to have to pump. So as your body temperature heats up, as you become more and more dehydrated, you're going to lose more and more glycogen because your heart rate is going to get faster and faster and faster and faster. And all of these things working together are going to slow you down until you're absolutely hit the wall, burned out, walking. That's it. Or you just slow down, keep your heart rate level lower, run by feel. Don't run by your pace watch. That will just destroy you. You don't want to run your normal marathon race pace. And just slow it down. Feel what you normally are supposed to feel at marathon race pace, but obviously you'll be way slower. And again, take in more sodium from gels, take in more sodium from mineral pills. On a hot, hot day, you'll need mineral pills. And like I said, more hydration. So here's a little tidbit on humidity. Slightly, I mean, it's the same concept as heat, but humidity, if the dew point reaches about 75%, you're going to it says here, I find this is extremely uncomfortable. I find this kind of amusing. It says skip or dramatically alter expectations. Well, all right. Anyway, um, that's what you can expect from dew point, humidity levels, and heat. So it is pretty much the same thing. The two work hand in hand. Let's continue on. Now, let's talk about cold, because let's face it, right now it's not hot, it's going to be cold. And some of the similar things occur from what was 60 degrees and hotter is somewhat typical on 60 degrees or colder, right? Where like you might say 50, 55 degrees is still kind of okay for a lot of us, although many of us grew up or have lived a long time in Southern California, which does tend to be warmer than where I actually grew up, which was filled with snow and ice and sleet. Um, you know, I remember standing outside waiting for the bus in the morning after taking a shower, and even though I dried my hair, I'd touch my hair and it was solid. And the reason it was solid is because the moisture in my hair had frozen waiting for the bus in the morning. Very different world, no, in Northern Ohio, where I grew up in Toledo, but great place to grow up. I love it here for many, many reasons. But it's okay to be wet because, let's face it, we humans do take a shower. We do, we do swim. We do really, really well with moisture on our skin from sweat. But it's not good to be cold, right? So you really do, when you're dealing with cold, you probably all know this already. I'm just going to go through a couple of points already. But you need to layer up. You need to wear that running jacket. You need to wear that you can tie around your waist if it starts getting warm out. Um, you need to wear like layers of running tech shirts. I do that all the time. And in fact, right now, I think I'm wearing two tech shirts underneath this sweater and this jacket. But regardless, um, pardon me, layer up with layers of moisture wicking, what we call tech shirts, so that the water will get away from you and evaporate away from your skin, and you won't feel that cold wetness, right? So you can stay warm. I've run in the rain when it was cold out. I wore a running raincoat that had breathing, little slits in it for breathing. And so you could, get rid of your sweat but stay warm. And it worked great. And I stayed warm. And some of my favorite runs have been running in the rain, um, and even on a cooler day. So consider that the next time you have to go out in the cold, whether it's rain or just cold, layer up, stay warm, there are running sweatshirts. that will even moisture wick away the sweat from you, even as a sweatshirt. And they're all great. So before you go out into this cold air or whatever of the morning or the evening or whatever, be careful running in the dark. Obviously, we don't want you to get hit by a car. We want you to wear bright lights or run on a treadmill or whatever. But deep breathing can help warm you up even before you get outside and start breathing a little harder because you're running or walking or run walking or whatever. There's a guy named Wim Hof in Scandinavia somewhere, and he's swum with just a wet, not a wetsuit, but just a normal swimsuit with no shirt. He's swum underneath giant, icebergs, and he's been in ice baths, and they recorded his body temperature as just rather normal and not getting colder. And what it's all about for him, I'm not recommending Wim Hof, but is interesting character. Um, Actually, I spelled it wrong. It's Wimmhoff. I just have WM. There's an I missing in there. At any rate, you can find him on YouTube and the internet. Hoff is his last name, Wim. But basically, what he does is a series of long inhalations and short inhalations that amount to the short breathing would amount to hyperventilating. Just standing there before you go out into the cold, and then deep breathing will relax your body. And the combination of the two, and holding it and relaxing and exhaling and relaxing and exhaling and that kind of thing. Sorry, my cat just ran by me. Um, anyway, that will actually warm you up a little bit. On the other hand, I do know a guy from Runner's World magazine who I won't mention who it was, who went to one of Wim Hof retreats in Scandinavia and said he left after a day because it was ridiculous, because this is what us runners do anyway. We start breathing harder, and it was just a complete waste. We warm up from just moving, from running. He's more into getting in the cold water and ice baths and all that. But at any rate, so deep breathing and quick breathing before you go out into and running in place and warming up inside before you go out there will definitely get your body temperature up a little higher. So when you go outside, you won't be feeling it as much. All right. Now, um, your muscles are going to be tighter. You're going to have what I wrote here, muscle stiffness. You're going to have reduced, because of that muscle stiffness, you're going to have reduced stride length, meaning the amount your leg can reach out in front of you or push back behind you is going to be shorter stride length. And because of that, you're going to be running slower. And because of the muscle stiffness in general, you will be, hi, welcome home. My wife just walked in the door. Anyway, you will be slower, no question. Once you warm up a little bit, you might be able to get moving a little faster, depending on how cold it really is out there. I am reminded running out there in the snow with layers of clothes, even. And the way layers of clothes, I think, weighed me down a little more and slowed me down. But definitely start out a little slower, enable your body to warm up even a little more than when you're inside, kind of jumping up and down and doing those warm-ups we normally do before the LA Roadrunners, especially before we do Wednesday night track. Start out a little slower. Focus again, like I said, with the heat, focus on your effort level, focus on feel, run by feel. How does it feel compared to your marathon race pace? That's kind of where you want to be. If you're doing an easy pace run, how does your normal easy pace run feel? Focus on that feeling, not your pace. Pace is really, in general, the least effective way to focus on running You really want, if you have a power meter, cyclists use power meters all the time. A great way to do it, power meter is based on relative analysis of watts, meaning energy output. All the watches have different ratioed scales. In other words, Garmin's ratioed scale for power output is going to be different from Polar's, which will be different from Coros. If you get a watch with a power meter in it, you have to go up a higher number or a more expensive watch with Garmin before you really get power meters. Um, most Coros, I know my little number two, my Pacer 2 watch has power meter built into it. And by a different ratioed scale, I mean like centigrade and Fahrenheit are different ratioed scales, but 0 centigrade is the same as 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the degree of freezing. Water freezes at 0 centigrade and 32 degrees Fahrenheit. But the numbers on the scale are vastly different, even though they kind of mean the same thing for temperature. It's the same thing with power meters in these different companies. They don't have a universal ratioed scale of numbers. Got it? Heart rate is not a bad way to look at it. The colder it is, the hotter it is. Your heart rate is going to be elevated somewhat. Heart rate's not a bad number to look at if you know what your heart rate normally would be on an easy run or marathon race pace run. Psychologically, with any of this stuff, if you're about to go out into the cold and you want some motivation, always know your why. Why are you doing this? If you don't have an answer to that, you're probably not going to be very motivated to do anything, right? Um, Anything in life, if you have a goal and you want to achieve that goal, well, that's your why. I want to achieve this goal. That's my why. Um, and that's an extremely motivating thing. I want to finish a marathon. That's a wonderful why to have. That puts you probably at greater fitness than most of your friends and family that you know. If you want to get faster, that's a wonderful why. That is a goal. That is a great, great motivator. Know your why. Um, I want to torture myself. Not a good why. Find a positive why. No should, no ought to, no got to, no must. I should do this. I ought to do this. I got to do this. I must do this. Why? Why do you need to should this, ought to, got to, must do this? Have a why. It is so much more powerful than I should go out there. I should do this. I got to get up and go out there in the cold and rain and run with my friends. I got to do this. No, why? Well, I want to see my friends. I told them I'd be there. Have a why. Um, I always like to come back to this. Nike used to say, just do it. I thought that was the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. Have a why. Why should I just do it? I know this is all blasphemy. You should just go do it. That's like the macho runner, run walker, walker thing. Don't think, just do. Well, we runners tend to be we endurance athletes, runners, run walkers, walkers. We tend to be rather intelligent people. We generate more brain cells, for one thing, just from what we do. Different brain cells at lower levels, different brain cells at higher levels. I won't go into that. We tend to be rather smart people. Grant you after a long run when our glycogen levels from our brain along the rest of our body are depleted, we don't think as well as clearly because our glycogen levels are depleted. But as soon as we get some carbs back in our system and those carbs go back into your brain as glycogen, you start thinking clearer again. After a marathon, you may stop losing the ability to calculate finish times and paces and whatever because your brain is not functioning as clearly because your glycogen is being depleted. As soon as you eat again, you're fine. Regardless, we endurance athletes tend to be pretty intelligent. We are growing more brain cells. At any rate, so I know saying that, have a why, and not just do it, may be blasphemy, but it is so much more motivating to have a why than a just do it. Um, if all you got is a just do it, just don't do any of this. Just don't do it. Have a why. That's all I have to say. I think I hear my wife screaming from the other room. Maybe not. Anyway, with that, I say to all of you, do not look at where you are today and ask why. Look to the future and all the possibilities that lie therein and say, why not? I thank you, and I will see you all at the finish line. Anyway, with that, I am going to turn off my recording. And anyone who is on live, I'm going to answer questions for you guys. Anyone who is watching this recording, I'm going to say good night to all of you watching. And those of you live, stay on. Those of you watching the recording, good night. And we'll see you all, as I say, at the finish line.